Welcome to the channel. Step back in time and immerse yourself in the world of Tudor England. Here, we explore the daily lives, struggles, and joys of common folk in the 16th century. From bustling markets to grand festivals, discover history like never before. Stay tuned for fascinating stories and insights. Life as a commoner in Tudor England. Daily struggles, festivals, and legacy of the 16th century. Part 1. Awakening in the Tudor world. The morning air is crisp and damp, seeping through the wooden shutters of the cottage as the first golden rays of sunlight stretch across the thatched roof. Inside, the air carries a mix of wood smoke, straw, and the lingering scent of last night's pottage, clinging to the rough woolen blankets that offer little warmth against the chill. You shift on the straw-filled mattress, the coarse linen of your smock scratching against your skin as you stir from sleep. There is no luxury in the life of a Tudor commoner, no feather-stuffed pillows or soft silken sheets, only necessity shaped by the unyielding demands of work and survival. The distant crow of a rooster marks the start of the day, though it is hardly needed. The rhythm of life is dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, and those who tend the land must rise early to make use of every moment of daylight. A creaking wooden ladder leads to the upper loft where the younger children sleep, curled together beneath rough-spun blankets. The fire in the hearth has long since dwindled to glowing embers, and the first task of the morning is to stir it back to life. There is no time for idleness. The cottage must be swept, the animals tended, and the morning meal prepared before the day's true labor begins. A wooden bucket is hoisted onto your hip as you make your way outside, where the cool, damp earth presses against your bare feet. The morning dew clings to the grass, and the air is thick with the scent of damp soil and distant smoke from neighboring homes. Beyond the small plot of land surrounding the cottage, the village slowly stirs to life. The miller's wheel groans as it turns, grinding grain into flour for the day's bread. The blacksmith's forge smolders in the distance, soon to roar with the heat of molten iron. Chickens cluck and peck at the dirt, and a pair of pigs root noisily in their pen, eager for their morning feed. The water from the well is cold and clear, splashing against your hands as you draw it up in a wooden pail. A trickle escapes, darkening the fabric of your kirtle as you heave the weight of it back toward the cottage. Inside, the hearth crackles as dry twigs catch flame, sending the scent of burning wood curling through the air. A pot is set to warm, its contents a simple mixture of oats and water, thickening into porridge over the heat. There is no variety in breakfast, no lavish feast of meat and sweet pastries like those enjoyed by the gentry. For the common folk, food is fuel, plain and unadorned, meant to sustain rather than delight. Bread, dense and dark with coarse grains, is eaten alongside a small portion of cheese or, on fortunate days, an egg freshly laid by the hens. Those who live near rivers or coastal areas may have access to fish, but for most, meat is a rarity, reserved for feast days or celebrations. As you eat, you listen to the sounds of the household around you. A baby whimpers in the corner, wrapped tightly in swaddling cloth, while an older child scuffs bare heels against the wooden floor, still drowsy with sleep. Your mother hums a quiet tune as she kneads a lump of dough, her hands dusted with flour, while your father sharpens a knife, preparing for the day's labor. Outside, the first signs of commerce begin to stir. The village green is slowly coming to life, with merchants setting up stalls to sell their wares. A traveling peddler calls out in a sing-song voice, offering needles, ribbons, and tin trinkets to those who can afford them. The air is filled with the murmur of voices, the creak of wooden carts, and the occasional bark of a stray dog weaving between the legs of passers-by. Your day, like that of all common folk, will be spent in labor. Whether it be tending the fields, assisting in the household, or working in a trade, every member of the community has their place. For those bound to the land, the seasons dictate the rhythm of life. In spring, the fields must be plowed and sown with barley, wheat, or rye. In summer, The crops demand constant tending, and in autumn, the harvest must be gathered before the first frost sets in. Winter brings its own challenges, with food stores dwindling and the ever-present threat of illness lurking in the damp air. The village blacksmith's hammer rings out, sharp and steady, as he sets to work shaping iron into horseshoes and tools. The weaver's loom clatters rhythmically, its wooden frame trembling under the motion of flying shuttles. A young apprentice sweeps the threshold of the carpenter's shop, his tunic dusted with wood shavings. Even the children are not spared from work, their small hands employed in tasks suited to their abilities, gathering firewood, fetching water, or scaring away birds from the newly planted fields. Despite the hardships, there are moments of warmth and familiarity. The village is a place of shared burdens and simple joys. The people are bound together by necessity, each relying on the other to survive. There is comfort in the predictable rhythm of life, in the knowledge that as long as the fields yield grain and the livestock thrive, the village will endure. As the morning stretches onward, the last embers of sleep fade, replaced by the quiet determination that carries you through each day. The work is never-ending, the toil constant, but within it lies a deep and abiding sense of purpose. You may never know the grandeur of courtly life, nor taste the luxuries reserved for the nobility, but you belong to a world of honest labor and unspoken resilience. And as the sun climbs higher into the sky, you take your place within it, ready to face whatever the day may bring. Part 2. The Struggles of Rural Life. The earth is damp beneath your feet, soft with the lingering moisture of the morning dew as you make your way toward the fields. The scent of freshly turned soil fills the air, mingling with the distant smoke of cottage hearths and the sharp tang of manure spread across the land. The rising sun casts long shadows over the gently rolling landscape, illuminating the rows of furrowed earth that stretch toward the horizon. Your hands, rough from years of labor, tighten around the worn wooden handle of the plow as you prepare for another long day's work. Life in the countryside is dictated by the seasons. The land provides, but only in return for relentless toil, and there is never a moment when labor is not required. In spring, the fields must be prepared for planting, the soil turned and enriched with dung, the seeds carefully sown before the rains come. In summer, the crops must be tended, weeds pulled from the furrows, and birds chased away from the ripening grain. Autumn brings the most grueling work of all, the harvest, when every able hand is needed to gather the year's bounty before the cold sets in. And in winter, when the land lies dormant beneath a blanket of frost, there is still work to be done, repairs to the thatched roofs of cottages, tools to be sharpened, and livestock to be fed and kept from freezing. The village, though small, is built on the backs of its laborers. The vast majority of commoners in Tudor England live off the land, whether as free peasants or as tenant farmers bound to the will of the local lord. Some own small plots of land, passed down through generations, but many must lease their fields from the manor, owing a share of their harvest in rent. A portion of the grain you grow does not belong to you. It must be sent to the manor house, where the steward of the estate ensures that the lord's share is accounted for. It is a system that leaves little room for prosperity. A poor harvest can mean hardship, hunger, or worse, a winter of true desperation. The tools of your trade are simple, crafted from wood and iron. A heavy wooden plow, pulled by a sturdy ox, cuts through the soil, churning up clumps of earth that will soon bear grain. A sickle, its curved blade sharp and gleaming, is used to cut down the stalks when the time for harvest arrives. There are no machines to ease the burden of labor, no relief from the aching muscles and the sunburned skin that come from hours spent beneath the open sky. Yet the land is not merely a source of sustenance, it is a master in its own right. It must be respected, its rhythms understood. Some years, the harvest is plentiful, and there is enough grain to fill the barns and silos, enough to last through the cold months and even set aside seed for the next planting. Other years, blight or poor weather can devastate the crops, leaving families on the brink of starvation. Famine is never far away, and for those who have little to begin with, even a single failed season can mean ruin. Beyond the fields, livestock provide an additional, though limited, source of food and income. Pigs are the most common, as they require little space and will eat almost anything, growing fat on scraps and foraged roots. A single pig, slaughtered in the autumn, can provide salted pork to last through the winter, its meat preserved in brine or smoked over the hearth. Chickens, though valuable for their eggs, are often eaten only when they stop laying, their tough meat stewed into pottage. A cow, if the family is fortunate enough to own one, is a source of milk, cheese, and butter, though much of what it produces may be owed to the local lord. The burdens of rural life do not fall solely on the men. Women play an equally vital role in ensuring the survival of the household. While men labor in the fields, women tend the home, baking bread, brewing ale, spinning wool into thread, and weaving cloth for clothing. They care for children, tend to the garden where vegetables and herbs grow, and often keep small animals such as geese or goats. It is an endless cycle of work, with little time for rest. Children, too, are expected to contribute. There is no concept of childhood as a time of leisure. From the moment they can walk, they are given tasks suited to their size. Young boys help their fathers in the fields, learning the rhythms of the plow and the sickle, while girls assist their mothers in the home, fetching water, stirring pots over the fire, and feeding the animals. By the age of 7 or 8, a child may already be working full days, their hands calloused from labor. Despite the hardships, there is a quiet resilience in the life of the commoner. There is pride in a well-plowed field, in a barn filled with grain, in the knowledge that one's work sustains not just a family, but an entire village. The bonds of community are strong, forged through shared struggle. When a neighbor's roof is damaged in a storm, others come to help repair it. When a family suffers a loss, the village comes together, offering what little they can spare. Still, there is little room for ambition beyond survival. A commoner's place is set from birth, and though some may rise through hard work or fortune, most will live and die within the same patch of land that their ancestors tilled. The feudal system, though weakening in some parts of England, still holds firm in others, ensuring that wealth and privilege remain in the hands of the few. For the vast majority, life will always be a cycle of labor, dictated by the unchanging rhythms of the land. As the day stretches on and the sun rises higher, sweat beads on your brow, your arms aching from the repetitive motion of guiding the plow. There is no choice but to continue. The work does not wait, and the land does not yield its bounty freely. Every harvest, every loaf of bread, every mouth fed is the result of toil. And as you press forward, your feet sinking into the earth with each step, you know that tomorrow will bring the same. Part 3. A simple but essential breakfast. The morning air is crisp, carrying the lingering chill of the night as the first fingers of sunlight creep through the wooden slats of the cottage walls. The hearth, the very heart of the home, still smolders with the last embers of last night's fire, a faint red glow barely visible beneath a layer of gray ash. It must be revived quickly, for the day cannot begin without warmth and, more importantly, without food. Breakfast in a Tudor village is not an elaborate affair. There are no tables laden with sweetmeats, no delicate pastries or spiced delicacies reserved for the nobility. For a commoner, the first meal of the day is simple, plain, hearty, and dictated by whatever is available. A pot of pottage, thickened with grains and flavored with whatever scraps of vegetables or herbs can be found, simmers over the fire. It is not a dish to be enjoyed, but rather one to sustain. You take a wooden bowl from the shelf, its edges worn smooth from years of use, and ladle a portion of the thick gruel into it. The steam rises in delicate curls, carrying the faint scent of onions and salted herbs. If fortune has smiled upon the household, there may be a bit of milk added to make it richer, or even a rare egg stirred in for extra nourishment. But more often than not, the meal consists of little more than oats or barley boiled in water, filling enough to keep hunger at bay but lacking in flavor. Alongside the pottage, a thick slice of coarse bread rests on the wooden table. It is made from rye or barley, dark and dense, with a crust hardened by the heat of the oven. Wheat bread, known as manchet, is a luxury reserved for the wealthy, its fine white texture far beyond the reach of common folk. Instead, the bread of the poor is rough and heavy, made from whatever grains are at hand, sometimes mixed with ground peas or beans to stretch the supply. A small piece of cheese, its edges slightly hardened from age, is placed beside the bread. Cheese is a staple in the diet of a Tudor commoner, providing much-needed sustenance when meat is scarce. Made from cow's or goat's milk, it is often salted heavily to preserve it for as long as possible, the sharp tang of fermentation cutting through the otherwise bland meal. The air is filled with the low murmur of voices as the household gathers to eat. There is little conversation beyond what is necessary. The morning meal is not a time for leisure or indulgence. It is a brief pause before the true work of the day begins. Each bite is taken with purpose, the food chewed methodically as minds drift toward the tasks that await. If there is ale left from the previous day, it is poured into wooden cups and passed around. It is weak and thin, a far cry from the strong brews enjoyed by wealthier folk, but it is safer than water, which is often contaminated. Brewed at home in large clay jugs, the ale is made from barley and fermented just enough to kill off harmful bacteria, making it a staple in the diet of every commoner, including children. For those who live in villages near rivers or the coast, breakfast may sometimes include a small portion of fish, herring or eel, salted or smoked for preservation. It is a rare addition, but one that brings a welcome change to the otherwise monotonous diet. In households that keep chickens, the occasional egg may be boiled or fried over the fire, but most are saved for market days, where they can be traded for other necessities. There is no sugar in this meal, no sweetness to balance the salt and grain. Honey, when it can be obtained, is treasured, used sparingly to sweeten a rare treat or soothe a sore throat. But for the most part, the Tudor commoner's diet is one of necessity, built upon survival rather than pleasure. The wooden spoon scrapes against the bottom of the bowl as you take the final mouthful of pottage. The bread is eaten to the last crumb, for nothing can be wasted. Hunger is a constant companion, and even the simplest of meals is not taken for granted. As the bowls are gathered and the last traces of the meal wiped away, the day's work calls. There is no time to linger, no opportunity to rest. The fields must be tended, the animals fed, the loom set to weaving, the forge kindled for the blacksmith's hammer. The morning meal is a brief moment of sustenance, a fleeting pause before the ceaseless march of labor resumes. Outside, the village is already stirring. Smoke curls from chimneys, carrying the scent of burning wood and damp earth. The distant bleat of sheep mingles with the rhythmic clatter of hooves on the dirt path as a farmer drives his cattle toward the pasture. A woman kneels by the well, drawing up fresh water in a wooden bucket, her breath visible in the cool morning air. The world moves forward, as it always does, propelled by the unyielding demands of survival. And so, with hunger satisfied but never quite sated, you step away from the warmth of the hearth and into the day's labor. The simplicity of the meal lingers, a reminder that life as a commoner in Tudor England is not one of indulgence, but of endurance. There will be another meal at midday, if time allows, and supper when the work is done. But for now, the fields call, the tasks await, and the morning meal, brief and essential, is already a distant memory. Part 4. The Village Market and the Struggles of Trade. The village square is alive with sound and movement. The rhythmic clatter of wooden carts on the uneven dirt path mixes with the chatter of merchants calling out their wares, their voices rising above the hum of the gathering crowd. The scent of freshly baked bread drifts through the air, mingling with the sharper tang of salted fish and the earthy aroma of freshly pulled vegetables. It is market day, the one time each week when the village bursts into activity, and for a Tudor commoner, it is both a necessity and an ordeal. The market is the lifeline of the village, the only place where goods can be exchanged, where coin changes hands, and where people from surrounding hamlets gather. Farmers arrive early, leading donkeys laden with sacks of grain, baskets of apples, or bundles of fresh herbs. The blacksmith hauls his latest work, iron nails, horseshoes, and simple tools, while the potter displays his carefully shaped jugs and bowls, their clay still bearing the faint scent of the kiln. Everything that cannot be produced at home must be sought here. But with every trade, there is struggle. You grip the small sack of grain tightly, your fingers clenching the rough fabric. It is the only thing you have to barter this week, and it must be exchanged wisely. Perhaps it will buy a handful of onions or a small wedge of cheese. If you are lucky, you may even manage to secure a scrap of salted meat, a rare indulgence. But there are no guarantees in trade, and every transaction is a careful dance between necessity and negotiation. The baker's stall is crowded, the smell of warm bread drawing people in. Loaves of all shapes and sizes are stacked neatly, their golden crusts promising nourishment. Manchet, the fine white bread made from wheat, is out of reach for most, reserved for the tables of the wealthy. Rye and barley loaves are more affordable, their darker, heavier texture filling but coarse. You hold up your sack of grain, offering it in exchange for a loaf, but the baker shakes his head. He already has enough grain this week, he says, and he cannot afford to take more. You move on, searching for another option. At the dairy stall, a woman stands behind a wooden table lined with earthenware pots filled with fresh milk and rounds of cheese. She eyes your sack of grain, weighing its value before nodding. In return for half the grain, she offers you a small wedge of cheese, hard and salty. It is not much, but it will add flavor to your meals, and so you accept. The blacksmith's forge crackles in the background, the steady rhythm of his hammer ringing through the air as he shapes glowing metal into sturdy tools. A farmer nearby examines a new plow blade, turning it over in his hands, judging its worth. A few coins are exchanged, the metallic clink echoing against the anvil. Money is scarce in the village, with most trade conducted through barter, but those who have coin hold power. Among the market stalls, the Lord Steward moves through the crowd, his keen eyes scanning for those who owe their dues. Many villagers pay their rent in crops or labor, but some must part with their precious coin to satisfy the demands of the manor. There is no escaping the obligations of tenancy. Failure to pay what is owed can mean eviction, punishment, or worse. You lower your gaze as the steward passes, hoping to avoid his attention. Not all trade is fair, and not all merchants are honest. Weights and measures are often tampered with, making goods appear heavier or lighter than they truly are. A dishonest trader might mix grain with chaff to stretch his supply, or water down ale to make it last longer. Some villagers have learned to spot these tricks, but others fall victim, left with less than they paid for. Complaints are rarely met with justice. Those with power dictate the terms, and common folk must make do with what they can get. As the morning passes, the crowd thickens, and the sounds of haggling grow louder. A traveling merchant, his brightly colored cloak marking him as an outsider, sets up his stall near the edge of the market. His wares are unlike anything found in the village: delicate glass beads, bolts of dyed cloth, and small pouches of exotic spices. The villagers approach with caution, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Most cannot afford such luxuries, but they pause to admire them nonetheless. A commotion breaks out near the alehouse, where a man protests loudly as the alewife demands payment. He had promised to pay later, he claims, but she is having none of it. She knows that promises do not put food on the table. The dispute is settled when another villager steps forward to vouch for the man, agreeing to cover his debt until he can repay it. Trust and reputation hold great value in a village where survival depends on the support of one's neighbors. As the sun begins its slow descent, the market starts to empty. Goods have been bought and sold, bartered and haggled over, and those who have secured what they need begin the journey home. Some return with baskets full, their efforts rewarded. Others, less fortunate, leave with barely enough to sustain them. The cycle will repeat next week and every week after that, for as long as there is trade to be done. You clutch your small wedge of cheese and the remainder of your grain as you step away from the market square. It is not much, but it will have to do. The struggles of trade are endless, and survival depends not just on what you can grow or make, but on what you can barter and buy. For a commoner in Tudor England, the market is more than just a place to trade. It is a battle for sustenance, a test of wit and endurance in a world where every bite of food is hard-won. Part 5. The Role of the Church in Everyday Life. The bells of the village church ring out across the fields, their deep, solemn tones cutting through the crisp morning air. The sound is both a summons and a reminder, a call to prayer and an ever-present symbol of faith that shapes every aspect of life. For the Tudor commoner, the church is not just a place of worship but the heart of the community, a guiding force that dictates the rhythms of the week, the structure of the year, and the milestones of life. The stone church stands at the center of the village, its weathered walls bearing the marks of time. A simple structure compared to the grand cathedrals of the cities, it is nonetheless a place of reverence and authority. The heavy wooden doors are worn smooth from generations of hands pushing them open, and inside, the air is thick with the scent of beeswax and damp stone. Rows of wooden pews line the nave, their surfaces polished by years of use, while at the far end, the altar stands in solemn dignity, draped in embroidered cloth and lit by flickering candles. Attendance at Sunday Mass is not optional. It is an obligation, one that binds the entire village together in shared devotion. To be absent is to risk both social judgment and divine disfavor. The priest, a learned man compared to most, delivers the service in Latin, his voice echoing through the small church. Though few among the common folk understand the words, they bow their heads in prayer, crossing themselves at the appropriate moments, their faith unquestioning. The mysteries of the Mass are accepted without need for explanation, for the Church has always been, and always will be, the keeper of knowledge and the gateway to salvation. Beyond Sunday worship, the influence of the Church extends into every corner of daily life. It is the priest who records births, who blesses marriages, and who presides over funerals, committing the dead to the earth with solemn prayers. He is not just a spiritual guide but also a source of counsel, offering advice on matters of morality, family disputes, and even farming practices. His word carries weight, for he speaks with the authority of God, and few dare to question him. The Church also dictates the calendar, marking the passing of time with a cycle of feasts and fasts. The most significant of these is Easter, a time of solemn reflection followed by joyous celebration. Lent, the weeks leading up to Easter, demands abstinence from meat, a challenge for those already struggling to feed their families. Christmas, though not yet the grand holiday it will become in later centuries, is nonetheless a time of feasting and communal gatherings, a rare moment of respite in a life otherwise consumed by labor. Saints' days, the year, each one dedicated to a holy figure and often accompanied by village festivities. Tithes must be paid, a tenth of all earnings given to the Church. This is not simply a request but a duty, one that is enforced with the same rigor as any tax. Even those who have little must find a way to contribute, whether in coin, in crops, or in labor. The wealth of the Church is evident in its holdings, for even the smallest village church owns land, and its priests live in relative comfort compared to the struggling farmers and laborers who sustain it. For those who seek solace or redemption, the confessional offers an outlet. Kneeling in the small wooden booth, a villager murmurs their sins through the lattice screen, the priest's voice calm and steady as he assigns penance. The weight of guilt is lifted, though sometimes the price is steep: prayers to be repeated daily, alms to be given, or acts of service to be performed. In a world where divine punishment is feared as much as hunger or disease, absolution is not just a comfort but a necessity. Yet the Church is not without its shadows. Rumors of corruption filter down even to the humblest of villages, tales of priests who grow fat on tithes, of indulgences sold to the wealthy as a shortcut to heaven. Some whisper of Martin Luther and his defiance against Rome, his teachings spreading like wildfire in distant lands. But for the commoner, such matters are beyond reach. To question the Church is to risk excommunication, a fate as dire as death itself, for to be cast out is to be denied not only the sacraments but also the community's support. Despite this, faith remains unshaken. The Church is a pillar of stability in an uncertain world, offering hope in times of famine, plague, and war. Its teachings provide the promise of a better life beyond this one, a reward for those who endure their suffering with patience and piety. Heaven is the ultimate goal, and the hardships of this world are but a test, a trial that must be endured with faith and humility. As the final prayers are spoken and the congregation files out of the church, the village returns to its daily rhythms. Some linger, speaking quietly with the priest or lighting candles at the altar. Others hurry home, their minds already turning to the work that awaits them. But the presence of the church remains, an invisible force guiding every decision, every act of labor, every moment of rest. It is a comfort, a burden, a source of unity, and an instrument of control. It is inescapable, woven into the very fabric of life. And as the church bells toll once more, marking the passing of another hour, there is no doubt that they will continue to ring, unchanging, for generations to come. Part 6. Marriage and Family Life. The scent of freshly cut flowers drifts through the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil. The village green is alive with chatter and laughter, for today is a wedding day. A rare occasion of joy in a world often weighed down by toil and hardship. A wedding is not just the joining of two people but the union of families, the forging of alliances, and the securing of futures. Marriage is not simply a matter of love. It is a necessity, a duty, an expectation placed upon every man and woman. To remain unwed is to risk isolation, to lack security, to be without a household of one's own. From a young age, boys and girls are raised with the knowledge that one day they will marry. The choice, however, is rarely theirs alone. Among the common folk, marriages are often arranged, though not in the strict, formalized manner of the nobility. Parents and elders play a key role, ensuring that a match is beneficial for both families. A woman's dowry, though modest compared to that of a noblewoman, is still a matter of importance. A few coins, a small patch of land, a cow, or even household goods such as blankets and cookware can determine the desirability of a bride. For men, the ability to provide, whether through land, skill, or a steady trade, is equally crucial. The age of marriage varies. While noble families often wed their daughters young to secure political ties, common girls usually marry in their late teens or early 20s. A man, needing time to establish himself, may marry later, sometimes in his late 20s or even early 30s. It is not uncommon for widowers to remarry quickly, for a household without a wife struggles to function. Children need mothers, and homes need caretakers. A woman, once widowed, may also seek remarriage for protection and stability. The wedding itself is a simple affair. The couple stands before the priest, exchanging vows that bind them together under the eyes of God and the law. There is no elaborate gown, no extravagant feast. Such luxuries are for the noble class. The bride wears her best kirtle, perhaps adorned with a borrowed ribbon or a sprig of fresh herbs for good fortune. The groom, dressed in his finest tunic, clasps her hands as they make their solemn promises. A small celebration follows, with music, dancing, and whatever food the families can spare. A loaf of bread, a jug of ale, perhaps even a roasted chicken if fortune has been kind. Once the festivities end, life begins in earnest. A wife's duties are clear. She must keep the household running, cook meals, tend the garden, spin wool, sew garments, and rear children. A husband must provide, whether through farming, trade, or labor. The balance of work is strict, for survival depends on each member of the household fulfilling their role. There is no room for idleness. Children come quickly. It is expected, hoped for, and yet also feared. Every birth is a moment of both joy and danger. Many women do not survive childbirth, and many infants do not live to see their first year. Death is a familiar presence in Tudor England, and families must learn to accept loss with solemn grace. Yet children are also the future, the hands that will one day take over the fields, the trade, the household duties. They are the ones who will care for their parents in old age, ensuring that they do not face the final years alone and helpless. Discipline within the family is strict. A child must learn obedience from an early age. The father's word is law, and to defy it is to invite punishment. A switch across the palms, a harsh scolding, extra chores, these are the common forms of discipline. To be idle is to be useless, and a useless child will grow into a useless adult. Boys are taught to work alongside their fathers, learning the skills that will one day sustain them. Girls shadow their mothers, mastering the arts of cooking, cleaning, and child-rearing. Education, if available at all, is reserved for boys, and even then, only for those who are fortunate enough to afford it. Most learn simply by doing, by watching, by listening. A woman's worth is measured in her ability to keep a good household, to bear children, to obey her husband. A man's worth is in his ability to provide, to lead, to discipline. It is a rigid structure, one that offers little room for individual desires. But within it, there are moments of tenderness, an old couple sitting side by the fire, a mother gently rocking her infant to sleep, a father teaching his son how to shape wood into a sturdy tool. Love exists, even if it is not always spoken aloud. Life within a marriage is not always easy. Hardship breeds tension, and arguments are inevitable. A failed harvest, a sick child, an unpaid debt, any of these can drive a wedge between husband and wife. Yet, divorce is not an option for commoners. A marriage, once entered, is a lifelong commitment. Only death, or in rare cases, abandonment, can sever the bond. Those who find themselves trapped in unhappy unions must simply endure, for there is no alternative. Yet, despite the hardships, marriage remains at the core of Tudor village life. It is the foundation upon which families are built, the structure that holds the community together. It is a necessity, a duty, a source of both joy and sorrow. And as another wedding feast comes to an end, and the newlyweds step into their shared life, the cycle continues, unbroken, just as it has for generations. Part 7. Farming and the Hardships of Rural Life. The first light of dawn spills over the fields, turning the dewdrops on the grass into tiny glistening jewels. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the distant smoke of early morning fires. A rooster crows, a signal that the day has begun, though for the farmer, it is merely a continuation. There is no true beginning or end to the labor of the land, only an endless cycle of planting, tending, and harvesting. For the commoner in Tudor England, farming is not simply a livelihood, it is survival. The majority of people live in rural villages, working the land that provides their food, their income, and their security. Some own small plots, barely enough to sustain their families, while others labor on the lands of wealthier landowners, their hands forever calloused by toil. The fortunate few who possess larger holdings may employ others, but even they are not free from the hardships of agricultural life. The land is both a blessing and a curse, a provider and a relentless taskmaster. Each season brings new demands. In spring, the fields must be prepared, the soil turned with wooden plows drawn by oxen. Seeds are scattered with careful precision, each grain representing the hope of a future harvest. The summer months bring endless labor. Fields must be weeded, livestock tended, and water carefully rationed. Autumn is the time of harvest, the most crucial period of all. Every able hand, from the youngest child to the eldest grandparent, must work from dawn until dusk, gathering wheat, barley, and oats before the weather turns. The winter months offer no rest, only a different kind of struggle, keeping livestock alive, preserving food, repairing tools, and enduring the bitter cold. A farmer's tools are simple, for there is no access to the advanced machinery of later centuries. The plow, the sickle, the flail, these are the instruments that determine success or starvation. Wooden carts creak under the weight of harvested grain, while heavy sacks are hoisted onto shoulders worn thin by years of labor. There are no luxuries, no conveniences, only the ceaseless rhythm of work. The yield of the land is never guaranteed. A poor harvest means hunger, suffering, and even death. A late frost can ruin crops before they have a chance to grow. Drought can parch the fields, leaving nothing but dust and withered stalks. Too much rain can flood the land, drowning young shoots before they can take root. And then there is disease, blight that turns healthy grain to rot, illnesses that sweep through livestock, leaving behind only lifeless carcasses. The common farmer lives with the constant knowledge that fate is fickle, and that all the effort in the world cannot always protect against disaster. Even in a good year, a portion of the harvest does not belong to the farmer. Tithes must be paid to the church, a portion of the yield set aside for the local priest. Taxes must be given to the landowner or the crown, ensuring that even in times of scarcity, the burden of obligation remains. Those who cannot pay risk losing what little they have. Some are forced to sell land, their only means of survival, and become mere laborers on the very fields they once owned. Others fall into debt, a slow and relentless descent into poverty from which few can escape. Livestock is both an asset and a liability. A cow provides milk, but she must be fed. A pig can be slaughtered for meat, but keeping it alive until then requires careful planning. Chickens lay eggs, but they are vulnerable to disease and predators. Every animal is a precious resource, and losing even one can mean hardship for an entire family. Meat is a rare luxury, often reserved for special occasions or sold at market to pay for other necessities. Most meals consist of pottage, a simple stew made from grains and vegetables, thickened with whatever scraps are available. Bread, coarse and heavy, is the staple of the diet, accompanied by ale, which is safer to drink than water. Despite the hardships, there is a certain pride in working the land. The farmer understands the rhythm of the earth, the changing of the seasons, the signs that tell when rain is coming or when the soil is ready for planting. There is satisfaction in seeing a field full of golden wheat, in knowing that the efforts of many months have borne fruit. There is joy in the harvest festival, in the gathering of neighbors to celebrate the end of a successful season. Yet, there is no escaping the rigid structure of society. A common farmer will never rise above his station. No matter how hard he works, the wealth and privilege of the nobility remain out of reach. Land ownership is power, and most of it is concentrated in the hands of a few. Even the most prosperous farmer remains at the mercy of the lords who own the estates, the laws that govern trade, and the whims of nature. For those who cannot endure the hardships of rural life, there are few choices. Some leave their villages behind, seeking work as laborers in the growing towns and cities. Others turn to more desperate measures, poaching game from the Lord's lands, stealing grain, or seeking charity from the church. The lucky ones find service in a noble household, exchanging the backbreaking work of the fields for the rigid discipline of servitude. But for most, there is no escape. The land is both prison and sustenance, an inescapable fate passed down from father to son, mother to daughter. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the fields, the farmer leans on his hoe, wiping sweat from his brow. The day's work is done, but tomorrow will bring more of the same. There is no end, no respite, only the unbroken cycle of labor. And yet, as he looks over the land, the furrows stretching toward the horizon, the last rays of light catching the golden stalks of wheat, there is something else, too. A quiet understanding, a connection to the earth that has sustained his ancestors and will, he hopes, sustain his children after him. Part 8. Trades and the Life of Skilled Workers. The rhythmic sound of a hammer striking metal echoes through the narrow streets. The scent of sawdust and freshly tanned leather mingles with the sharper tang of dye and ink. In the heart of the town, where houses press close together and market stalls line the squares, skilled workers labor from dawn until dusk, shaping raw materials into the goods that keep the kingdom running. Not everyone in Tudor England toils in the fields. Within towns and villages, tradesmen form the backbone of everyday life, crafting, repairing, and selling the goods that both commoners and nobility rely upon. Unlike the farmer, whose livelihood is bound to the mercy of the land, a skilled worker depends on his craft and reputation. A shoemaker fashions sturdy leather boots for travelers and fine slippers for the wealthy. A weaver works at his loom, turning wool into fabric that will be stitched into gowns and doublets. A carpenter shapes timber into strong doors, tables, and chests, each plank carefully measured and fitted. To become a tradesman is not a simple matter. A boy with ambition must begin young, apprenticed to a master craftsman who will teach him the secrets of the trade. Apprenticeship is a long and arduous journey. For 7 years, sometimes more, the apprentice works under his master's roof, learning by watching, by doing, by making mistakes and correcting them. He receives no pay, only food and shelter, but in return, he gains knowledge that will one day allow him to earn his own living. The master is strict, for his reputation depends on the quality of the goods he produces. An error in a blacksmith's forge can mean a weak horseshoe that shatters on the road. A mistake in a baker's oven can ruin a batch of bread, leaving a family without their daily meal. The apprentice must be diligent, for his future rests on his ability to master his craft. After years of training, the apprentice becomes a journeyman. He is no longer bound to his master, yet he does not yet own a shop of his own. Instead, he travels, seeking work where he can find it, refining his skills, earning wages that will one day allow him to open his own business. Some never reach that final stage, spending their lives as journeymen, moving from town to town, always working under another's roof. But for the fortunate few who save enough or inherit a shop, the title of master craftsman awaits. A master craftsman holds a place of respect within his community. He may train apprentices, oversee journeymen, and sell his goods at market. Many belong to guilds, powerful organizations that regulate trade, ensuring that only those who meet strict standards can practice a craft. The guilds set prices, maintain quality, and protect their members from unfair competition. To be accepted into a guild is a mark of success, a guarantee of steady work and social standing. Yet even for skilled workers, life is not without hardship. The cost of materials fluctuates, and a craftsman who cannot afford good quality wood, metal, or cloth will struggle to find customers. Competition is fierce, and those who fail to attract business may find themselves destitute. Illness or injury can bring ruin. If a weaver loses the use of his hands, if a carpenter breaks his leg, if a blacksmith's sight begins to fail, there is no safety net to catch them. A lifetime of skill can be undone in a single moment. Women, too, play a role in the world of trade. Though most formal guilds exclude them, many women work alongside their husbands, assisting in shops, managing accounts, or even taking over the business if their spouse dies. Some trades, such as brewing and midwifery, are dominated by women. A brewer's wife may oversee the preparation of ale, selling it from her home or at the market. A skilled midwife, though not wealthy, can earn a respectable living by helping bring new life into the world. But opportunities remain limited, and most women, no matter how skilled, must rely on a husband's name to secure their place in trade. The market square is the center of activity for craftsmen. Here, they sell their wares, haggling with customers, competing for attention among the throng of merchants, farmers, and peddlers. The air is thick with voices, buyers inspecting a butcher's cuts of meat, a tailor boasting of his fine imported wool, a potter displaying freshly fired earthenware. It is a place of opportunity, but also of uncertainty. A good day means full pockets and a hearty meal, a bad day means hunger and debt. As the sun sets and the market stalls are packed away, the craftsmen return to their homes. Some, the more successful, live in houses of stone and timber, their workshops attached to the front of their dwellings. Others, less fortunate, live in cramped quarters, struggling to keep up with rent and expenses. But all share a common burden, the need to work, to create, to sell. There is no rest, no room for complacency. A craftsman who does not work does not eat. Despite the struggles, there is pride in skill. A finely made table, a well-forged blade, a perfectly fitted shoe, these are marks of craftsmanship, proof of labor well spent. To be known as a master of one's trade is a source of honor, a title worth striving for. And so, as another day begins, the hammer strikes metal once more, the loom clicks and clacks, the chisel carves into wood. The work continues, as it always has, as it always will. Part 9. The Role of Religion in Everyday Life. The bells of the parish church toll, their deep, resonant chimes rolling across the village, calling the faithful to prayer. In the cool, dim interior of the church, flickering candlelight casts wavering shadows on stone walls, and the scent of burning wax and incense fills the air. Rows of wooden pews stand beneath towering arches, and at the altar, the priest prepares to lead the congregation in worship. For the common people of Tudor England, religion is not merely a belief, it is the foundation of life itself. From birth to death, the Church guides every aspect of existence, shaping customs, laws, and daily routines. It offers solace in times of hardship, structure in times of uncertainty, and a sense of belonging within the community. Faith is not a private matter, it is a public duty, an expectation woven into the very fabric of society. At the heart of every village and town stands the church, a towering presence both physically and spiritually. It is more than a place of worship, it is the center of social life, where villagers gather not only for Mass but for meetings, celebrations, and the sharing of news. Its bells mark the passing of time, ringing for weddings, funerals, and feast days. The priest, often one of the few literate men in the village, serves not only as a spiritual guide but as a source of knowledge and authority. He reads the scriptures to those who cannot, delivers sermons in English or Latin, and reminds his flock of their duties to God and the crown. Daily life is punctuated by religious observances. Morning prayers begin the day, and evening prayers end it. Sundays are sacred, no work is to be done, and all are expected to attend Mass. Holy days and saints' feast days are strictly observed, often accompanied by village fairs, processions, or special services. Lent, a solemn period of fasting and reflection, prepares the faithful for Easter, while Christmas brings feasting and celebration. The rhythms of the agricultural year are intertwined with religious festivals, plowing, sowing, and harvest, all marked by prayers and blessings. The sacraments govern the key milestones of life. A newborn is baptized within days of birth, welcomed into the faith and protected from the dangers of original sin. Marriage is a sacred bond, performed before the eyes of God and the community, binding husband and wife in both love and duty. Death, too, is a deeply religious affair. the last rites administered to ensure the soul's passage to the afterlife, the body laid to rest in consecrated ground, prayers offered for the departed. Even the afterlife is a matter of certainty. Those who live virtuously will ascend to heaven, while sinners risk the torments of hell or the long purification of purgatory. Yet faith is not without fear. The wrath of God is ever present in the minds of the faithful. A failed harvest, a deadly illness, a sudden storm, these may all be seen as signs of divine displeasure, punishment for sins known or unknown. Superstition blends with doctrine, creating a world where charms and prayers alike are used to ward off misfortune. Some turn to relics, believing in their power to heal and protect. Others whisper of curses and omens, careful not to invoke the anger of unseen forces. The line between faith and superstition is thin, and many walk it carefully, never certain which act of devotion might bring favor or misfortune. The Church also serves as a source of charity. Monasteries, before their dissolution, provide food, shelter, and care for the poor. The parish priest collects alms, distributing them to those in need. Even among the struggling commoners, there is a sense of duty to help one's neighbors, to care for the sick, to bury the dead, to ensure that no soul is left entirely abandoned. Faith demands not only devotion but kindness, a reminder that in a world full of suffering, mercy is a virtue held in the highest regard. But the Tudor era is one of great religious change. The reign of Henry VIII brings the upheaval of the Reformation, tearing England away from the authority of the Pope. Monasteries are dissolved, their riches seized by the crown, their monks and nuns cast out into the world. The Latin Mass gives way to English services, and the Bible, once accessible only to priests, is now read in the common tongue. Some welcome the changes, believing them to be a return to true faith. Others cling to the old ways, worshipping in secret, hiding relics and prayer books in the hope that the tides will turn once more. Under Edward VI, Protestantism strengthens, Catholic rituals stripped away in favor of reform. Under Mary I, the country swings back to Catholicism, heretics burned at the stake, the fear of persecution spreading through the land. And then comes Elizabeth I, restoring Protestantism yet allowing some remnants of tradition to remain. Through it all, the common people must navigate shifting religious expectations, adapting to the rules of each new ruler while holding fast to the core of their faith. To be on the wrong side of these changes can mean exile, imprisonment, even death. Despite the turbulence, faith endures. The village church still stands, its bells still ring, the people still gather to pray. Whether Catholic or Protestant, the need for belief remains unchanged. For in a world of uncertainty, where famine, disease, and war are constant threats, faith offers something beyond earthly troubles. Hope, the promise of salvation, the reassurance that suffering is not without purpose. And so, as the last candle is extinguished, as the night settles over the village, prayers are whispered in the dark. The people of Tudor England, through all the trials of their time, hold fast to the one thing that has always sustained them, their faith. Part 10. Law, Order, and Justice. The village square is unusually quiet, the usual hum of daily life replaced by a tense hush. A wooden scaffold stands at its center, ropes hanging from its beams, a grim reminder of the fate that awaits those who defy the law. The crowd gathers, drawn by equal parts curiosity and fear. Some whisper in hushed tones, while others watch with hardened expressions, accustomed to the harsh justice of Tudor England. Law and order in the 16th century are strict, swift, and often brutal. To live as a commoner under the rule of the Tudors means to exist under an ever-present web of laws, regulations, and punishments. The law is not merely a tool of justice, it is a weapon of control, ensuring that people remain in their place and society functions without disorder. At the head of it all stands the monarch, whose word is law and whose power determines the fate of all subjects. Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I each enforce their own version of justice, shaping the legal landscape with their decrees. For the common people, the law is enforced by local officials, constables, watchmen, and justices of the peace. The constable, often a villager chosen for the role, is responsible for keeping the peace. He patrols the streets, settles disputes, and ensures that criminals are brought before the local court. Watchmen guard towns at night, calling out the hours, keeping an eye out for thieves and troublemakers. Justices of the peace, appointed by the crown, hold considerable power, overseeing trials and passing sentences. Crime is a serious matter, and punishment is harsh. Petty theft, a stolen loaf of bread, a missing chicken, can result in whipping, branding, or time in the stocks. The stocks stand in the village square, a place of humiliation where offenders sit trapped, their hands and feet locked in wooden restraints. Bystanders throw rotten food, jeer, and mock, turning punishment into public spectacle. More severe crimes, murder, treason, or heresy, carry graver consequences. A thief might lose a hand, a traitor might be hanged, drawn, and quartered. The spectacle of public execution is common, meant to deter others from following the same path. The gallows loom as a reminder that justice in Tudor England is swift and unforgiving. Hanging is the most common method of execution, reserved for thieves, highwaymen, and those who threaten the social order. The condemned stands before the crowd, a priest offering final prayers before the noose is tightened. The crowd watches in silence, or in cheers, depending on the crime, until the sentence is carried out. For those accused of the gravest offenses, the fate is even worse. A traitor may be drawn through the streets, hanged until near death, then cut down and disemboweled, his body quartered as a warning to others. The severed heads of the condemned sometimes decorate city gates, a gruesome message to those who might defy the crown. Yet not all justice is carried out so formally. In smaller villages, disputes are often settled without official intervention. A local lord may act as judge, issuing fines or punishments as he sees fit. Church courts handle matters of morality. Adultery, blasphemy, and disputes over marriage are settled by priests rather than magistrates. Some seek justice through revenge, taking matters into their own hands when the law fails them. Feuds between families, rivalries between neighbors, and personal vendettas sometimes erupt into violence. In a world where justice is often cruel and arbitrary, many take whatever means they can to defend their honor. Prisons exist, but they are not places of long-term confinement. Unlike modern times, where incarceration is a standard punishment, in Tudor England, prisons are mostly used to hold the accused until trial. The most infamous of these is the Tower of London, where high-profile prisoners, nobles accused of treason, political enemies of the monarch, await their fate. Common criminals might find themselves in a local jail, a filthy, overcrowded cell where disease spreads as quickly as despair. Those who cannot pay their way out must rely on charity or await their sentence, which is often swift and severe. For women, the law is especially harsh. A woman accused of witchcraft faces trials that are as much about fear as they are about justice. If crops fail, if livestock dies, if illness spreads through the village, it is easy to blame the old widow who lives alone at the edge of the forest. Accusations of witchcraft can result in public trial, where spectral evidence, visions, rumors, and supposed curses, carries as much weight as fact. If convicted, the punishment is burning or hanging, a fiery end for those deemed a threat to society. The rich are not always immune from the law, but their wealth provides them with protection. A noble accused of a crime may receive a trial, legal representation, or even royal pardon. A poor man accused of the same offense has no such privilege. Justice is not blind, it favors those who can afford its mercy. Corruption is common, bribes exchanged in dark corners, influence bought with coin and power. Even among commoners, those with friends in high places may escape punishment, while those without suffer the full force of the law. Despite its brutality, the legal system provides structure. The fear of punishment keeps many in line, ensuring that order is maintained. Laws against theft, assault, and disorder protect communities from chaos. The presence of local officials, however flawed, offers at least some semblance of security. And for all its cruelty, the system is not without moments of mercy. Pardons granted, sentences reduced, second chances given. As the sun sets, the village square empties. The scaffold remains, a grim silhouette against the darkening sky. Justice has been served, as it has been so many times before, and will be so many times again. The commoners return to their homes, whispering among themselves, knowing that in this world the law is both a shield and a sword. And so they tread carefully, living their lives beneath the watchful eyes of those who enforce it, ever mindful of the thin line between safety and ruin. Part 11. Leisure, Festivals, and Entertainment. The fields lie silent, the plough left to rest, the tools stored away. The air is filled with laughter, the sound of music drifting through the village. A holiday has arrived, and for the common folk of Tudor England, it is a rare and welcome escape from the toil of daily life. Leisure is not something freely available to the commoners. Most days are consumed by labor, whether in the fields, the workshops, or the homes where women weave, bake, and mend. Yet when the opportunity arises, on Sundays, feast days, or festival times, people make the most of it. Entertainment is simple, often communal, and deeply tied to tradition. The most anticipated events of the year are the great festivals, tied to both the religious calendar and the changing seasons. Christmas is a time of feasting, merrymaking, and games, with houses decorated in greenery and great fires blazing in the hearth. The Lord of Misrule, a figure chosen from among the lower ranks, presides over the revelry, turning the usual order of society upside down in a brief moment of festive chaos. Easter follows months of Lenten fasting, bringing with it grand processions and joyous gatherings. May Day, a celebration of spring's arrival, fills the village with dancing, singing, and the crowning of the May Queen. Men and women join hands around the maypole, weaving ribbons as they step in rhythm to the music. Midsummer's Eve is another highlight, marked by bonfires, storytelling, and the lingering belief in supernatural forces. It is a night when spirits and fairies are said to roam freely, and villagers gather to ward off mischief with charms and songs. The Feast of St. John brings further festivities, with plays, contests, and communal feasts where ale flows freely. Harvest festivals, occurring after the gathering of crops, are moments of both gratitude and relief, signaling the end of the hardest work and the arrival of shorter, colder days. But festivals are not the only source of entertainment. On ordinary Sundays, after church, villagers gather for games and sport. Wrestling, archery, and quarterstaff duels provide excitement for spectators and participants alike. The longbow is not merely a tool of war, it is a national skill, and men are often required by law to practice their aim, turning what might be a duty into a competition. Football, vastly different from the modern version, is a rough, chaotic affair with few rules and much enthusiasm. The game sprawls across fields and through village streets, with rival teams battling to drive the ball to their respective goals. Injuries are common, and complaints from local authorities even more so, yet the game remains beloved. For those seeking less strenuous diversions, there are simpler pastimes. Dice games, played in alehouses and by firesides, provide both entertainment and the chance to win, or lose, what little money one might have. Cards, though not as widespread as in later centuries, make appearances in wealthier households. Board games like Nine Men's Morris and chess challenge the strategic minds of those with the patience to play. Music is ever present, with villagers gathering to sing, play instruments, and enjoy the talents of traveling minstrels. The world of the stage is another great attraction. Traveling players move from village to village, setting up makeshift stages and performing morality plays, farces, and historical dramas. These performances are loud, lively, and full of exaggerated gestures, designed to be understood even by those standing at the back of the crowd. Mystery plays, retellings of biblical stories, are common in towns, sponsored by guilds and performed with elaborate costumes and props. With the rise of theaters in London, the most ambitious troupes travel to the capital, seeking fame and fortune on the grand stages of the city. Even for those who never leave their village, tales of these performances spread, fueling imaginations and inspiring new forms of storytelling. For children, entertainment is found in simple joys. Games of tag, blind man's bluff, and hoop rolling keep them occupied when chores allow. Dolls, carved from wood or fashioned from cloth, are treasured possessions. Boys fashion toy bows and swords, imitating the skills of their fathers and dreaming of adventure. Though their lives are often filled with responsibility from an early age, they find moments of freedom, running through fields, climbing trees, and chasing after stray chickens with delighted shrieks. Alehouses provide a different kind of recreation for adults. These establishments, more common in towns than small villages, are places of social gathering, where men come to drink, talk, and settle disputes. Here, gossip spreads, alliances are forged, and occasional brawls break out. The ale flows freely, brewed locally and consumed in great quantities. Drunkenness is not uncommon, and while some authorities frown upon excessive revelry, others see it as a harmless release from the burdens of daily life. Even in the countryside, where entertainment options are fewer, the natural world provides its own diversions. Hunting, though often restricted to the nobility, is sometimes permitted for commoners in designated areas. Fishing in rivers and ponds offers both sustenance and sport. Falconry, while primarily a noble pursuit, is admired from afar, the sight of a trained bird swooping through the sky a marvel to those who witness it. Storytelling, too, fills the evenings, with elders recounting tales of past kings, legendary battles, and eerie folk tales that send shivers through eager listeners. Though leisure is scarce in the lives of Tudor commoners, it is deeply cherished. These moments of joy, however brief, provide respite from the hardships of labor, the uncertainties of survival, and the rigid constraints of society. When the festivals end, when the games are over, when the last song fades into the night, the people return to their daily struggles. But they do so knowing that, in time, another feast day will come, another celebration will arrive, and once more they will dance, laugh, and forget their troubles, if only for a little while. Part 12. The End of an Era and Lasting Legacy. The years have passed, the world shifting like the tide, and Tudor England stands at the edge of change. The streets that once bustled with familiar faces now see new generations taking their place. The great Tudor monarchs, who ruled with strength and spectacle, have left their mark upon the land. And for the common folk, life continues, shaped by the echoes of the past and the whispers of an uncertain future. The final years of Elizabeth I's reign bring both prosperity and unease. The Queen, once young and vibrant, now carries the weight of time upon her shoulders. Her face, once the image of strength and majesty, is now lined with age, her fiery hair faded beneath powdered wigs. Yet she remains formidable, a ruler whose presence commands loyalty and fear. Under her rule, England has seen great victories: the defeat of the Spanish Armada, the flourishing of the arts, the expansion of trade. But for the commoners, these triumphs mean little if their bellies are empty, if their fields fail, if the plague returns. The late Tudor years bring with them the rise of new challenges. The enclosure of land, which began in earlier reigns, now accelerates, pushing more people from the countryside into crowded towns. Common land, once freely used by villagers, is now fenced off for sheep farming, leaving many without means to sustain themselves. Those who once lived by the rhythms of the fields now struggle to find work, swelling the ranks of the urban poor. The streets of London are filled with beggars, some crippled by hardship, others turn to crime in desperation. Laws against vagrancy grow harsher, branding the unfortunate as criminals rather than victims of circumstance. The old ways are vanishing, replaced by a world that is less forgiving, more demanding, ever shifting. Religion, too, remains a source of tension. Though the violent persecutions of Mary's reign have ended, and Elizabeth has sought a middle path, the scars of the Reformation still linger. In villages and towns, people navigate the delicate balance between outward conformity and private belief. The Book of Common Prayer is used in church services, but in hidden corners, some whisper the Latin prayers of the old faith. Spies and informants lurk, watching for signs of disloyalty, for words that might betray a heart still loyal to Rome. A careless statement, a refusal to attend church, a secret gathering in a priest's home, any of these can lead to accusations, fines, or worse. Fear remains, even as the country outwardly settles into its new religious identity. The commoners adapt, as they always have. The young continue to marry, to raise children, to work as their ancestors did before them. The traditions of festivals, markets, and village gatherings persist, though they, too, evolve with time. The old feasts tied to Catholic saints are now repurposed, stripped of their former meaning but not their joy. The customs of May Day, Midsummer, and Christmas remain, though in some places they are tempered by Puritan disapproval. The world is opening, growing larger than the villages and fields where most people spend their lives. News of distant lands, of explorers and merchants returning with strange goods and stranger tales, spreads through the taverns and marketplaces. The common folk hear of lands beyond the sea, of the riches of the New World, of men who set sail and never return. Some dream of escape, of adventure, of something beyond the narrow confines of their birth. But for most, such dreams remain distant, as unattainable as the stars that shine above their thatched roofs at night. With the dawn of a new century, a new dynasty is on the horizon. Elizabeth's death in 1603 marks the end of Tudor rule, the passing of an age that has defined England for over a century. With no heir of her own, the throne passes to James VI of Scotland, uniting England and Scotland under a single ruler. The Tudor era fades, giving way to the rule of the Stuarts. Some embrace the change, hopeful for stability and continued prosperity. Others fear what it may bring, uncertain of what lies ahead. But though the Tudors are gone, their legacy endures. The England they shaped, through war and peace, through tyranny and progress, continues to evolve. The religious shifts, the legal structures, the cultural developments all leave their mark, rippling through the centuries. The language of Shakespeare, the grandeur of Hampton Court, the legal precedents set by Tudor law, all remain even as the world moves forward. The seeds of empire, planted in Tudor soil, will grow into something far greater, for better or worse. For the commoners, the change in dynasty may mean little in their day-to-day lives. The fields still need tending, the workshops still require labor, the markets still hum with the exchange of goods and gossip. But they are part of a larger story, one that stretches beyond their own lifetimes. They have endured war, plague, famine, and persecution, yet they have also found joy, love, and meaning in the simple moments of existence. They have sung, danced, prayed, and mourned under the same sky that will watch over future generations. And so, life continues. The Tudor age has ended, but its people remain. Their struggles, their triumphs, their quiet moments of laughter and sorrow, these are the true heart of history. Not the grand battles or the royal decrees, but the daily lives of those who lived beneath the weight of it all, shaping history in ways unseen but never forgotten. The village wakes once more, the sun rising on a world that is changing, yet ever the same. And with it, the commoners of England rise, stepping forward into whatever the future may hold. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this journey into Tudor England. Life as a commoner was tough, but also rich with tradition, resilience, and community. Stay tuned for more historical explorations. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. there's always more history to uncover together. See you next time.